Okay. Hello, I hope everyone can see and hear me. If not, post messages in the chat there. My name is Kyle Villano. I'm going to be your moderator today, and we appreciate you attending this session. We're going to go over the New York State Department of Financial Services updates and best practices as they relate to cybersecurity there. With that, please do for housekeeping, post questions in the chat, any logistics issues, and at the very end, we'll get into kind of some of the questions that you have there. But we thought to bring in some experts today to go through some of the strategies. I certainly am not an expert myself here with Consortium Networks, but we do have the right folks on board. And with that, I want to get into some introductions. So my name is Kyle Villano. I am Managing Director for Services here for Consortium Networks. I got a background of 20 years in cybersecurity, exposure to NIST cybersecurity framework, NIS2 directives to the practitioner side, network security, SOC, risk management, and so on, spanning various industries there. And with that, I kind of want to pass it down the line here next to Franklin Jackson.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Franklin Jackson. I'm the Chief Operations Officer here at Cybrella. Been in the industry in IT and IS for about 36 years. Kind of career highlights: CIO of Quality for AT&T Wireless, Executive Director for Cybersecurity for the Department of Defense, and various other companies as CEO, CISO, CIO. Looking forward to having a conversation with you to talk about the board and the C-level and how NYDFS will help drive you to a better program. Thank you.
Thanks, Franklin. We'll go to Yosi next. Oh, I think you're on mute there, Yosi.
About that, yeah. So hi, everyone. I'm Yossi Bar Khalifa. I'm the Chief Risk Officer and CISO at Cybrella. I have 25 years of experience in cybersecurity and compliance with multiple frameworks, including the NYDFS, SOC 2, NIST 852 family, and NIST cybersecurity framework, HIPAA, PCI, and many others. I currently lead all the CISO services in Cybrella, and I have many years of experience as CISO in large enterprises and financial institutes. And I'm happy to join you guys here today to talk about NYDFS and the new requirements.
Thanks, Yosi. And Franklin, Yosi, myself, we're service providers here between Cybrella and Consortium. We really wanted to get a practitioner in here, and we think we have the perfect one with Chetan there. So we'll pass it off to Chetan to introduce himself.
Thank you, Kyle. Hello, everyone. My name is Chetan Patel, and I'm CISO for Halaba, which is a German bank, and I manage their US and UK branches. I've been in the cybersecurity field and information security field for 23 years. I started it in 2001 and a little bit before, but September 2001 event pushed me towards moving towards cybersecurity, not by my choice, but here I am. And I'm very familiar with DFS 500, NIST, ISO 27001 frameworks and regulations. I also work on FC and PRA regulatory requirements, working on DORA requirement for EU. So I have worked more international, but I have also worked with American banks in basically the retail banking sector, as we call it. That's part of my experience as well. Happy to be here, and thank you for having me. Back to you, Kyle.
Thanks, Chetan. Okay, so we're going to go through some slides here just to get a little bit of a baseline here as we get into Q&A. Make sure we're all on the same level, mostly myself here. So appreciate the team's help in creating these. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so the New York State Department of Financial Services, they implemented, a suite of regulations there. It's called Part 500. and that's to safeguard the financial services sectors from cybersecurity threats there. And these regulations require maintaining a robust cybersecurity program. And the key requirements there, I won't read through all the controls, but you can see, that it does include things like risk assessments to penetration testing. And why is it important? In light of increasing cyber threats, really want to protect the consumer's private data and ensure stability and integrity of the financial system in New York State. And part of that is ensuring a strong posture across all the different functions, aligning to whether it's in this cybersecurity framework or other, from identify all the way to recover. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay. And we're going to get into, in a later slide, kind of a lower level detail of the dates. But these amendments, the amendments became effective on November 1st, 2023. And the compliance deadlines for those, they're going to require them within 180 days. And that's going to end up falling on April 29th, 2024 this year. So about a few weeks after tax day, you got to get ready to get aligned for this. It's going to be a phased compliance. So they provide a phased approach to the compliance, enabling the entities to prioritize based on criticality and complexity. However, right now, all entities should start an action plan, prepare that, document that, get it funded to ensure smooth transition and adherence to those new regulations there. Go to the next slide. Okay, so the spotlight's on the governance and Class A company requirements. So the amendments introduced stringent governance requirements, including board oversight, annual CISO reporting on cybersecurity, and CEO and CISO certification of compliance. We're actually hearing this, from our clients between our two companies today. And Class A companies, is a new category for entities with significant revenue or employee count, which impose additional obligations such as independent audits, privileged access management, and enhanced monitoring there. And why is it interesting is these enhancements not only increase the security posture of larger financial entities, but also set a precedent for cybersecurity governance that could influence regulations beyond New York State. And looking ahead, the focus on the governance and the introduction of the Class A company requirements represent a forward-thinking approach to cybersecurity and emphasize that critical role of management and tailoring those security measures to risks there. Now we're going to get into the timeline here in the next slide some more. So I'm not going to go through all these. We are going to send the slides out for reference. So I would, if you believe that NYDFS affects you, I would have this stapled to your office door if you can. So kind of going by sections there, you could see the notices to the superintendent. The effective date for that is December 1st, 2023. Having a cybersecurity program that's included on April 29th. This year. We get into risk assessments, that's going to be also on the 29th of this year. Looking in October, really pushing down kind of a third-party service provider security policy there, getting into incident response and business continuity management. And then as we get into next year, multi-factor authentication in October of 2025, asset management and data requirements, and so on. And we'll get more into kind of the context of these in the Q&A. I don't know, Franklin, Yosi, Chetan, anything to add to this implementation timeline slide here? Okay.
Thank you. I think, Kyle, you covered it pretty well. Just be aware that there are some subsections that are implemented earlier and same part and other subsections are implemented later, as you can see. So be mindful about that. because it's easy to mix them up. For example, if you look at 500.05, A1 is a little bit earlier than other subsection, and A2 is a little bit later, right? So have to be careful about that implementation timeline.
Awesome. Thanks for the context there. Okay. All right. Well, what we'll do now is we're going to get into the Q&A and really kind of put the panelists on the spot here. So our first question is going to go to Yosi. And what I want to know is, I've kind of been living with the NIST cybersecurity framework, CIS, cyber insurance broker forums there. How does the New York State DFS map to the other frameworks and regulations that are out there in general? And for example, how does addressing the SEC regulations? We have a lot of our clients that are going through the materiality rule, and wondering how close they are to this. So, I don't know, Yosi, you'll be able to help us there? Oh, I think you're on mute there, Yosi.
Sorry about that again. So I started saying that all security frameworks are similar in some way. And for NYDFS, it follows the similar rules to other frameworks in regulations in the finance. So if you compare it to security frameworks and regulations in the finance industry, they're following the same rules. If you're comparing it to NIST or to other frameworks, they have some similarity, some overlapping requirements that they all follow. But for the regulation and frameworks in the finance industry, it makes sense that they're following the same rules because, they all have the same goal to keep the financial system stable and trustworthy. And that's why you give as an example, the SEC requirements are similar to the NYDFS requirements. And they are also similar to non-US requirements, like Chetan mentioned at the beginning. So all of them are actually asking the same. If we take SEC, for example, they also ask for cybersecurity program. They also ask for board cybersecurity oversight over the security program. They ask for security monitoring, incident response, reporting on incidents, external risk assessment. So definitely complying with NYDFS means that you comply also with SEC and other frameworks and regulation in the finance industry.
Sure, that's a relief then. Appreciate it.
Yeah, again, the idea is to make it easier for everyone to follow the same guidelines.
Right. And is there, kind of follow up on that, is there any way to, let's say you've got your program documented in a format of the NIST cybersecurity framework. Is there any strategies to get that documented to how it be viewed by someone assessing NYDFS there? Should folks change it?
Yeah. Usually when we work with organization on the cybersecurity program, we choose the main framework to work according to, which can be, for example, the NIST cybersecurity framework, and then we map it to all the other control frameworks that they need to comply with. If it's HIPAA or NYDFS or SOC 2 or anything else. So you have one program that people need to follow and need to implement and work with. But eventually this program is mapped to all the other relevant frameworks and regulations that this organization needs to adhere to. And that way we are able to also present to auditors and other stakeholders, what is the compliance roadmap and what is the compliance status, as well as working on the cybersecurity posture of the organization in a holistic approach.
Got it. All right. Well, cool. All right. I think we will go to Franklin next. So the new NYDFS regulations require that the senior governing body, in quotes, confirm that the covered entity's management has allocated sufficient resources to implement and maintain an effective cybersecurity program, end quote. How should CISOs and their board define sufficient resources?
I mean, and that's a good question, and that's been the long question since cybersecurity started, right? How you allocate the right resources to the organization to make sure that you're secured. In the case of a parent telling their entity that they need to be compliant with the new regulations, typically goes in a staggered effect, right? So the covered entity will probably be second in line to the parent company on how they do things so that they understand what the roadmap and the journey looks like for themselves to start, and then they'll go to the entity. Now, there's a couple questions later on that will kind of help define and the question or the answer the question that you just asked me, and the answer is that really it's about risk and the organizational risk and where you're at today within your journey. And that's about maturity. And so in order to be able to allocate the right resources, you have to talk about insourcing or outsourcing, whether you're going to build a cybersecurity program internally or you're going to outsource those resources to your organizations. And there's pros and cons to both sides to doing that. But the reality is that you have to just really pick a place and time. You have to understand what the risk is or what the threshold or blast radius for your organization is, and then start working our way through a roadmap that defines out what that income will be. It will be more to start, and it will reduce that cost over time as you place that program into effective audit compliance. And there's ways to do that, and I'll answer some of those later on in the conversation.
Got it. Okay, thanks. Okay, next we'll go to chat in there, and question is, do CISOs need to be involved, and are they the face or responsibility, or can they be delegated for compliance? So if you've got a GRC manager or a deputy CISO, can you delegate responsibilities and day-to-day with the regulation to them?
Sure. So before I start, let me give a small disclaimer that whatever I say is my view and not of that of my employer.
Sure.
But having said that and getting that out of the way, can CISO be outsourced? Is that the question that we are talking about, or is the functionality or is being outsourced is the question? In both cases, the answer is yes. You can have an outside CISO, or you can delegate the functionality of your program or part of your program, right? Outside. Let's say I'm not good at managing, or I don't have resources, going back to resource allocation. I do not have resources to perform a comprehensive risk assessment. Can I outsource this? Yes, I can outsource it. But it comes with a little asterisk on the top that although functionality can be outsourced, the responsibility of compliance to this regulation cannot be outsourced. Somebody within the organization has to be overlooking at what is outsourcing part doing, and they will be the one responsible for managing the compliance part of it. So definitely outsource with a small asterisk. Be careful.
Right.
You cannot outsource the risk. You can outsource the function. So
right. I also think of the RACI matrix there. Ultimately, the CISO is going to be the R, in that.
Absolutely. And also what happened is this is DFS 500 is not a new regulation, but in this part that came out, they also want the CISO or somebody in the person who is responsible for this oversight to be signing at the end of the year when they file out the certificate of compliance or acknowledgement of not compliance, which is like a debatable topic in its own. But that's a new requirement, right? That CISO or equivalent, somebody similar has to sign off along with the highest ranking official within the covered entity.
Got it.
Yeah, just to emphasize that, the new requirements are holding the CISO accountable for everything related to security, not just the program, but also reporting to the board, reporting on incidents, and even to be accountable for the application security program, which used to be, under engineering, like outside of the CISO responsibilities. So now the CISO is accountable for everything. So he must be involved. It's not something you can throw on your GRC team and say, this is another framework, deal with that. No, the CISO needs to be involved, needs to be all in, and make sure that he's oversighting, not just overseeing, but also really involved in the technical implementation of the program.
Got it. All right. Well, I'll follow up with that with you, Yosi. So, my impression, so I'm thinking of Class A companies I know, and I'm looking at just at a high level. Again, I'm just getting exposed to this risk assessments, pen testing, incident response plans. Shouldn't this be done already? Like in reality, what's your experience where you're actually catching some of these requirements not being done for a Class A?
Yeah, so I would expect every Class A, to ideally be adhering to best security best practices, regardless the frameworks. Those are like basic best practices of cybersecurity that any organization, specifically financial institutes, should adhere to. The NYDFS or other frameworks that are relevant are just coming to reinforce the requirements and clarify, the expectation, the existing expectations from the specific organization, and create some baseline. And also for a Class A organization that already comply with the previous NYDFS requirements, there are new adjustment to the requirements. We just mentioned some of them, like to have the board overseeing the security program, like holding the CISO accountable, making sure that the CISO is involved in the application security program, which is a little bit different. And also all the continuous controls they're asking for example, the continuous penetration testing and vulnerability management, the continuous security and compliance monitoring. Those requirements are changing a little bit the efforts and the structure of the security team and the resources in a way that maturing the program more than it's probably today, and an organization need to invest more on the maturity of the program, on the resources, on the technologies and controls they are implementing, and make sure they are covered with the new requirements.
Sure. I mean, it's got to be it's got to be challenging just thinking about kind of drawing the line when I think of kind of like CI/CD, SDLC, kind of as that's important, kind of where where the line is on where CISOs absolutely need to show that they're informing requirements and development there.
Yeah, and it's like getting into the business, that the applications is really are the business.
Yeah.
They're running the business and putting security into the business, into the applications. You need to find the balance, between security and business enablement, and this is something that you need to know how to do it.
Right, always a balance there. Well, cool. For Franklin, so we hear that this is a journey, and that's evident also in the timeline in the slide that we had before. What do you recommend as a high-level strategy for a CISO to define a roadmap that can get adopted and funded by their executive leadership team and board?
Yeah, so I mean, again, it depends on what the maturity of the organization is. If it's a immature organization, they're going to have to do obviously a lot more than a mature organization. But typically, when I look at it, and it's a gap assessment, right? So really, we're taking the framework and we're doing what we call the physical and the logical. So we're going to do penetration testing across the organization to understand their physical environment. And then we're going to take a logical approach to it. We're going to take the framework like NYDFS, and we're going to crawl the organization, understand where that is. So we call that a cybersecurity maturity assessment. And given those two put into place, it gives me a good idea about how I'm going to create my roadmap and how I'm going to go about doing that for business. Now, there's a lot of things that I have to think about before I actually start doing that. When it comes to third-party vendor risk management programs, outsourcing my SOC, roles and responsibilities within my organization, I'm going to have them on-prem or outsourced. And so at the end of the day, really, we're back to the question again that you asked first, is how do we get that money? And that money is by being able to speak intelligently about your organization to the business units in the organization, and actually having a seat at the table. Without a seat at the table, you're not going to fund it. You're not going to get money to do the things that you need to do, and you're not going to be able to progress your program forward. So first would be a seat at the table. Second is understanding your environment and where to go. And third is being able to articulate out what it is that you need to do for your organization and why that you need to do it.
Got it.
Yeah. And by the way, the maturity assessment is also related to the previous question. This is how we know what was done so far and what's the existing status, what's the future status of the NYDFS requirement, new requirements, and what are the gaps, and we can work on the gaps, because some of them probably, hopefully, adhere to some of the requirements so far as a Class A organization, and we can go from the same point as they stopped and not start from scratch.
Got it. Okay. Well, with that, let's not talk about tools and services, and I want to pick on Chetan there. So what do you think are the most helpful with products, services that you can bring in to meet the new requirements that are coming in? And I'll just caveat, Chetan, like these could be anything that you know of, from your peers. It doesn't have to be something that you're using. Just your impressions based on the market there of what would move the needle the fastest.
Absolutely. So I think maturity assessment, I think, was very good. So I would pick on that. And there's another thing is roles and responsibilities, right? So why do we need maturity assessment? It's like GPS. If you don't know where you are, you don't know where you have to go, right? So
Right.
I wish we all had a cybersecurity GPS at our home, and it will tell you this is the maturity, but we have to do it manually. So based on your maturity assessment and based on your roles and responsibilities, because in finance industry, we have 3 lines of defense, right? And every line will require different tools and services to go forward. Some of the tools that based on your assessment that you will find you need is a good GRC tool, EDR, SIM tool for monitoring and logging, vulnerability scanner. If you are developed into application development, you need dynamic application security testing or static application security testing, third-party risk management tools. How do you evaluate what your third-party risk is? And in current day and age, we are like, as we digitalize more and more, we tend to outsource more and more. We tend to rely more and more. So that's another thing that you will need. If you are a Class A company, as discussed before, you need privilege access management tool is mandatory. Also, another tool that you might need and you might not have is also part of PAM is blocking commonly used passwords, right? How do you block? Well, first of all, what is commonly used password? Secondly, how will you block it? And how will you do it for systems that are not connected to internet? Right. So I don't know that if there's any tool like that. For Azure services, it's easier. You can do it. But for your system that is like 20 years old, it's very hard to retrofit it, right? So you have to think on that. Now let's talk about services. Some of the tools I talk can also be used as a service. You don't have a vulnerability scanner, but you want to outsource your vulnerability management part of it. Happy to outsource. You can do that. But apart from that, you need good security operations center. Probably you need good penetration testing service provider. For data destruction, a lot of companies can do partial data destruction like crypto sharing, but for removing your hard drives and sharing them, that has to be probably done by somebody else. For audit needs, because now audit is a mandatory requirement, you might not be able to do audit, you might not have a big audit department, and you can get somebody from outside to do your auditing. Same thing for risk assessment, gap analysis, right? You might not have in-house talent. If you perform a skill assessment of your program, again, for maturity purposes, and if you find you have low-level maturity in risk assessment or auditing areas, or you do not have resources, you can get that. Incident response service provider, forensic service provider, incident recovery provider, because once you have something bad going on, how do you recover, right? You did forensic, now but you have to bring your system back up, and you may not have resources or talent for that. That's another service you may need to consider. One another thing that has emerged in the market, and probably I'm going to look into it, is ransomware remediation, right? Because there's a whole section or subsection in 517 that goes on and on about, hey, if there is a ransomware, you need to first of all notify DFS about it. If you decide to pay ransom, you have to tell why you paid the ransom, and you have to make sure you are not violating any OFAC regulation, right? So now all this status update you have to provide constantly, and on the same time you are talking to threat actors. How many people in finance industry on daily talks to threat actor and negotiate ransom? I don't have any experience on that. And probably I do not want to do that. I want to shield myself from this kind of discussion because A, it's not my core competency. B, I don't want to be in the front line with the threat actors. I don't want my name out there or my company's name out there. So that's something also worth looking into when you're looking out for services.
Right. That's got to be complicated with using ransomware brokers and all that with the new requirements. I can see why it's an area of research. Now, question, we talked quite a bit about maturity assessments, and that was a deep list that you just provided, Chet. And in a maturity assessment, would that give you a read on all of those areas that you mentioned on where you're hitting the mark, and where you have gaps?
Absolutely, it would, because and I think it's a requirement if you are a federally licensed agency, you have to do something called
Sure.
FFIEC cybersecurity assessment, where they have 5 levels of maturity, and you have to map your risk profile. There are 5 levels of risk profile and 5 levels of maturity, and your maturity should commensurate with your risk profile. So, for example, if you are at a maturity level of 2, your risk level can be 2 or below. It cannot be over, right? You can be more
Right.
mature, but you cannot be more risky. So there are different tools out there. Some are mandatory, and you have to apply these tools in your work environment. Use people who are kind of experienced in this, right? This is not a beginner's exercise that you cannot go to organization and start maturing, start assessing the maturity. You need somebody who has done this exercise before, has proven a track record of it, and then start working off of it. So definitely there are
Sure.
tools and there are requirements.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. The next question I got is for Yosi. So, as you rely on third parties, partners, contractors, how do you maintain compliance as you grow that extended team? Especially if you're a Class A organization there.
First of all, you can definitely rely on partners and third parties for some reason, and we just mentioned those in the previous answers. I mean, you can do that either to save resources or to save budget or even to save time, because some of the controls you need to implement might take you a lot of time to implement if you do it in-house, but if you outsource that, it might take you like a week instead of a year. And this is something that we should consider. How to maintain that? You should have someone within the organization that handling most of the security activities, or have some oversight on the process. Usually, we are also using some compliance tool. There are many out there to be able to hold all the controls and all the implementations and make sure that we follow them and that we are on track with everything. We are also working with auditors. As a Class A organization, need to be audited at least once a year, I believe. It's not a self-attestation, so they are coming with their expectations and requirements, so you can definitely document that and make sure that you are following them. And having continuous evaluations of your status. It can be through penetration testing, vulnerability management, it can be risk assessment, and it can be someone that is responsible for the governance of the entire process to comply with the NYDFS requirements.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, for Franklin, so what should a CISO of a parent or a holding company be concerned about compared to a portfolio or subsidiary company with the regulation there?
Well, I think the important thing to understand is when we look at parents and entities, right? So the entity organization is going to be looking to the parent for not only funding, but direction on which way to take based off of the risk appetite for the parent organization. If you have entities, you're probably a large organization. Within larger organizations, typically what you see between the CISO of the parent and the CISO of the entity is what's called a BISO, or a Business Information Security Officer. And they really help drive that that communication between the entity and the parent. And typically what you'll see is instead of eating the whole elephant, you'll see it piece by piece. And that's typically called step change. And in step change, the CISO, CIO, BISO, and CISO of the entity organization will get together and see what they can bite off on in that year. So maybe it's NYDFS 500, 3, 17, and 10. And so those will be agreed on in the year before. And then in the new year, the roadmap will be for those 3 control families to be met with staging based off the BISO. And the BISO will manage that process altogether. The parent company will then fund the CISO on the entity side in order to help get to regulation compliance.
Sure. Got it. All right. So Chetan, and I think you almost gave me, I think I know what the answer is from your previous go around there, but what do you think has been the most difficult to implement for most organizations and expensive amongst, all the requirements there, if you were to guess?
Yeah, so I will break it down into 2 parts, right? Difficulty level and expensive part. Sometimes difficult things can be expensive, but not vice versa. There are some low-hanging fruits that you can go for. But one of the difficulty level for a lot of organization, especially if they are in different jurisdiction within the United States or even within the world, is normalization of competing regulatory requirement, right? If one regulation says this, another one says exactly opposite, how do you make sure that you keep both regulatory requirements or both regulators happy, right? That's one thing that is very hard. Second is resources. Let's go back to resources, right? Squeaky wheel gets the oil, as they say,
Yep.
right? So same thing. If you are not going to talk to this about your resources and resource assessment and so on and so forth to your superiors, to your peers, and especially within head office, you will have a tremendous challenge later on, right? Because we have to be maintaining certain timeline and requirements has to be done within that timeline. If you do not meet this requirement, you're supposed to file, I would not call it certificate of non-compliance, but I would say acknowledgement of non-compliance. How many of us are willing to do that, right? So
Right.
securing right tools, right resources, understanding where you want to go is one of the difficulty level because it always begins with good governance. No
Sure.
program starts at implementation part. It starts at how it is laid out, whether and how well you communicate that skill set. There is also external factor, skill set. We already have a shortage of cybersecurity experts in this country and probably across the world, if I would say. You may not find the skill set, even if there is a budget, right? There is a lot of time. You are given budget to do something and find a right person, and you may not be able to find that person. So not having a skill set who can effectively implement all this requirement can be a big challenge. Now let's go to expensive part, right? Here, I would say it depends. Every company has different strengths and different weakness. If let's say you did your risk assessment or SWOT analysis, generally for finding weakness, I resort to SWOT analysis, and that's a different kind of risk assessment required for planning your strategy. But if you do your SWOT analysis and you find out that, hey, I'm very strong in vulnerability management area, but I can improve in risk assessment or other areas of governance, probably you need to focus that expensive part there. Maybe you can stop. Again, your maturity is better in vulnerability.
Sure.
Move your money there because we do not have infinite budgets. Company tends to keep cutting budgets, shareholder values, and so on. So uh, that's why I divided answer into 2 part: difficult and expensive. Expensive part will be where your weaknesses are. Difficult part would be normalizing your compliance requirement and finding a right skill set to implement the program.
Perfect. All right. So I think with that, I'm going to get to my final question for the panelists, and then we're going to get to your questions there. I'll lean on Brittany for that piece. So for my final question to everyone, if you were to pick just one, the most important takeaway from the regulation changes that are coming into effect over the next 2 years, what would it be? And I'm going to start with Yosi.
Okay. I would say that the new requirements for holding the CISO accountable means a lot. Means that they understand that the security cybersecurity is very important part of the business. And as Franklin mentioned, it should get a C-level seat in the table and be part of the strategy and the business objective of the company, and not just part of the technical requirements. And all the technical and business and other processes in the organization should be reviewed by the CISO to make sure that they are secure enough. And again, the purpose of holding the CISO accountable, I see it as just to be a business enablers, to be able to make the business better. Because for financial institute, it's hard or impossible to work and be trustworthy and effective without securing their system and processes. So this is definitely something that means a lot. This change of holding the CISO accountable means a lot to me, because it means that someone up there understands the importance of security, cybersecurity, and compliance within the business processes of the financial institutes.
Sure. All right. We'll go to Franklin next.
Yeah, well, I think I would probably choose the same one, and for a lot of the reasons that Yossi articulated, right? It's finally come to pass where people are starting to take the CISO serious. We're getting a seat at the table. People are starting to understand better, and it's understandable with the new technology. It's a new thing that we do. People are frightened. People are scared. But as business units start growing and start understanding what cybersecurity is and the importance of it, it allows the CISOs around the world to get a seat at the table. Yes, it's scary for the CISO as well, because now you really truly are being held accountable. But it allows us to move forward our practice and our domains and make sure that we provide organizations with security. And if you don't know what your field is, or you don't know what your job is, and you're sitting in a CISO position, it's going to become very clear quickly, and we'll be able to replace those with appropriate people.
Awesome. So we're 2 for 2 with accountability and a seat at the table there. We're gonna make it 3 for 3. Chat and let us know.
Sure. So what I will first of all say is that regulation is not new. But what is new is it's not only risk-based as it used to be before. It's now risk-based and principle-based. Therefore, you need to figure out, after careful evaluation, what is applicable to you. Secondly, is plan strategically, especially for timeline that is provided to you, because time creeps up very fast. And one of my takeaways that I have marked my calendar on different timelines. How am I going to implement this, or what conversations I'm going to have? Third one is engagement of stakeholders, because if you want that seat at the board, you will have to sell. At the end of the day, we are salespeople in security. We have to tell to our board why we need to be there, what needs to be done, right? Engage experts. We cannot be expert in everything, right? So if you don't know the answer, feel free to go and talk to your peers, talk to your service providers, and find the right answer. Because it's like a math problem. Knowing the answer and reaching the answer are completely different things. And you need help there, use that help. And third one is that everything within the regulation is not clear to us so far. Okay. There are answers still incoming. So you have to keep yourself up to date. This is not one-time conversation you have to have. This is continuous conversation. I'll throw a curveball here. Okay. And tell you about the timeline. There is a timeline for 500.4 where it requires audit program to be implemented, right? So does that mean that they have to start auditing before and finish their audit, or do they have to plan for audit, right? We don't know that answer. So unless if you keep up to date with the news, it will be a problem for everybody. So these are a few takeaways that I have.
Got it. All right. Well, with that, I want to take some questions there from the audience. Brittany, I'll lean on you for anything that was direct that I can't see, but I'm going off like first in, first out on the Q&A here. So the first one I have, what are the big movers? What investments would you see falling away? What's not working anymore and therefore deserves to be dropped from the budget to make room for maybe a privileged access management solution? And I think, Chet, we kind of got a little bit of your opinion related to this before. Maybe I'll go to Yossi.
Yeah, I would say again, from as we mentioned, the main issue is budget usually and resources. There is a lack of resources in cybersecurity today, and most organizations, specifically in the last couple of years, as also budget constraints with the market status and everything. So I would go for the most consuming controls, which are the security operations center. That usually you need, to have a team of people 24/7, and you need to have tools to monitor your environments, which are very expensive.
Sure.
And organization, usually financial institutes or large enterprises, used to invest a lot of in-house security operations center, and this is something that consuming a lot of money and a lot of people, a lot of resources. And we see more and more organization outsourcing the SOC to a SOC as a service that save them 90% of the cost and 90% of the resources managing this operation. And the second thing we mentioned is also the application security, doing in-house application security. Again, the tools are very, very expensive. You need a very specific skill set that is hard to get within organizations. And also the resources for application security specialists, it's hard to find. And this is something that we see more and more outsourced outside to company to provide application security as a service, which means that they are bringing the tools and the licenses as part of the service and doing all the threat modeling, code reviews, static code reviews, dynamic code reviews, and the architecture review, and making sure that the applications is following the secure software development lifecycle practices. The last thing I would say is incident response. It's almost impossible to find internal resources for incident response that know how to do incident response, how to do forensics, how to investigate. Those people are specialized just in that. And we see a lot of companies taking a retainer with such incident response providers. That can take control in the case of an incident, and know how to manage the incident, know how to do all the forensics and investigations, and eventually bring the incident into an end, containing the incident and solving the investigation.
Got it. And I think that would be pretty much the same answer you would have for what are companies spending less on, so that they can increase investments in other areas. I think that'd probably be a similar response, right, Yossi?
Yeah, that would save them money, resources, and investing, on skill sets of the internal teams, and they can, invest in other stuff by saving this money and resources that are more relevant for them or more easier for them to do it internally.
Got it. Okay. Well, we talked about leaned on kind of the expensive there and what we can reduce. Now, on the other side, going back to you, Chet, and what are some of maybe the no cost or quick win, low cost changes that can be put in to move the needle with the regulations?
Education. That's very easy to, it's a very low hanging fruit, but it's something that can be done very well. Now, when I just throw the word education, everybody will throw that word, that education and awareness is very important. Everybody will agree with me. But what you can do is take it to the next level of maturity, right? How do you know your education is working? Right? That's a big question. I train my users, but now is it working or is it not? So take it to the next level and have some KRIs or KPIs that you can use, right? Okay, I taught you about phishing, then conduct a phishing test and see how many people are reporting that phishing, how many people clicked on it and reporting, and how many people clicked and did not report, right? These are some low-hanging fruits. And it will save you a lot of money in the future. Why? Because a well-educated staff will reduce the number of incidents that company will face, and it will reduce your incident response cost. It will also not shame you in front of regulators. So there
For
are
sure.
myriads of benefit that is like very cheap to get by. And something to think about very carefully. Just don't stop at education level. Go forward. See how you can quantify the value of education, and you will be there.
Got it. Awesome advice.
And it's just not just education, it's making cybersecurity to be part of the company culture. As long as you culturalize your cybersecurity, that's a very long hanging fruit and huge investment in cybersecurity, because we see the people, the employees, as the first line of defense. Most of the incidents today start with a phishing, with someone clicking something, and when you train them, when you educate them well, as Chetan mentioned, that's a huge goal for the company to get.
Yeah, I will add to that, because you bring a good point that I forgot to add, is education is not only at user level. Education goes to the board level, because it's a requirement in the DFS regulation that somebody who can understand cybersecurity either works as an advisor for the board or is part of the board. So education is a multifaceted thing. It doesn't stop at one point. It goes on and on. Targeted training and is one of them. Provide education to your information security committee or what have you. That's another thing.
Awesome. All right. Well, for the next one, let's pick on Franklin a little bit here. So got a question. NYDFS isn't new, but it's changing. What are some of the most important lessons that you and your peers had to learn over the past few years, and what surprised you?
Oh, wow, that's a good one. What surprised me? Well, after a while, nothing really surprises you in the organization.
This field, right? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I would say that, it's kind of across the board. People forget that it's a program. And Chetan and Yossi both, talked a bit about that, right? So Chetan said qualifying, right? So it's qualifying, quantifying, what it is in your organization and what's important to you at that time. Whether you're a new organization or a mature organization, what does that look like? I've been to organizations where they say they do cybersecurity, and that is they have a person at the front door who checks your ID to get upstairs, right? All the way to, organizations like Northrop Grumman, where you can't get even in the door unless you have an invitation, retinal scanner, and everything else, right? So what makes things different? Really, it's based off your organization and it's based off your size. And I would say that when you start your journey, depending on where you're at, you need to first qualify and quantify what you're doing, how you're going to do it, and then you have to choose a path, whether you're going to bake in or bolt in your security. Bolting on your security means I'm going to go out to a lot of organizations and get those third-party tools internally, and I'm going to have SLAs with those customers. And then baked in is I'm actually creating and building my own organization internally based off the control frameworks that are out there for me to follow. So, probably the biggest changes that I've seen in the industry is there's an uptick in actual awareness and education. And so people are actually starting to carry the torch for it. Probably the worst thing that I've ever seen is just that case where I told you about the security officer. That was their cybersecurity program. So yeah, I would say that, you just have to measure where you're at on your journey. Understand that your journey is going to be a long period of time. Don't think it's going to get done tomorrow. In most cases, it's a 3 to 5 year plan. Be prepared for that. Be prepared that these control frameworks aren't going to be put in place just overnight or right away. And make sure that you articulate to the board that you need funding over and over again, and you have to qualify that, right? So an example would be why would I pay for a breach, right? What is the cost of a breach to an organization? So take a $3 to $4 billion insurance company. Calculate that out. It comes out to about $12.4 million per breach. If you give me $12 million, I can build you a hell of a cybersecurity program, and you don't have to pay those breach unless we get breached. And that's what cybersecurity insurance is for. So really, it's a journey. Pick a path and just execute on that path.
Love it.
Can I add something to that? Because I have something that I will surprise everybody with, right? Within this panel and the group. So what surprised me are two factors. Okay, first factor is enforcement section of 500.20, where they say that, hey, if you fail to materially comply with any subsection of this regulation, is considered in non-compliance within 24 hours. 24 hours is not a big timeline if you think. If you put in a server uh, in a production and forget to patch it completely for 48 hours, does that mean that you are not complying? And therefore, you will not be able to sign the certificate at the end of the year of compliance. Instead, you will be signing an acknowledgement of non-compliance. There's a lot to think about. It's a lot to take home and discuss within your organization as to what is 24-hour timeline? How does it affect you? How will you even start monitoring 24-hour timeline, right? Then 24-hour flies. Trust me, it's like when there is something going on and you might not know after like 15 days. What happens then? So a food for thought for everybody here. Second is external factor that surprised me is a lot of companies have not defined materiality threshold. This might go into SEC conversation too, but make sure that your organization has defined what is material and what is not non-material to you, because what is material and not complied in 24 hours goes into certificate of acknowledgement of non-compliance. So this is not an issue we are going to resolve today, but with time, we'll have to think about it and how we are going to report this, how we are going to monitor this 24-hour timeline, and how far we are going to go.
Sure.
And just to add one sentence to that, when they say 24 hours, and I mentioned at the beginning with the NYDFS requirements, they're just asking for transparency. They want the organization to be transparent in everything they do. So you need to be transparent every time, not wait 24 hours, but to be transparent from the beginning. And also to ensure that financial institutes are managing the risks effectively and being transparent about that. So that's very important.
So for transparency, what is the ideal communication protocol for that, would you say? Or what's worked the best going back to New York State?
They give you the thresholds of 24 hours for that, 72 hours for this. Again, they try to give you some time frame to do everything, but you can stick to the timelines. It's easier when, again, because you're also working on MSAs and other agreements and contracts. So it's easier to define these timelines. But it's good, to be clear and communicate everything from the beginning and not wait for something to happen.
Right. And what I wonder, is it an email, or do you pick up the phone and call a hotline, or is there a web app that you could pop in the data there?
Do you mean for reporting non-compliance?
Yep, for reporting non-compliance.
For reporting, there are two parts of it. For reporting and security incident, of course, you have to register with the FS portal. Every company has a company ID and you can file it. For reporting of non-compliance, it's an annual thing and you have to submit the report on the same portal. So it's done through a portal for DFS.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And anyway, you are audited by external parties, so they will also report on you.
Got it. Okay. And I think we're starting to get to time, and I think we kind of answered the next question before, where the CISO ultimately owns the accountability in the end. We gave a RACI chart example there. So I'll go to the last question and we'll go to the final slide. So the last question is, what advice would you give to a CISO who is dealing with this regulation for the first time, just cutting their teeth on it? And it's open to anyone.
I'll take that one for a
Okay,
starter.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So first and foremost, read the whole document. I cannot emphasize how much reading is required. It's like reading a religious book. Every time you read, you will have a new question. You will have a new view, because we grow every day. And when we grow, our views change. It says keep reading it. Second is ensure that this is socialized within every level of Achillean. That is upper management, middle management, and fingers on the keyboard. Every group is understanding what their role is. Have that conversation and keep up to date with all the news regarding the FS 500. That will help you will take you pretty far there.
And I would
Great.
add
Sorry,
to
Franklin, I
that,
didn't need to cut off.
yeah, I would add to that it's okay to take mentoring as well, mentoring for NYDFS, mentoring for executive reporting, which might be new to some of the CISOs. There are services out there. We are providing mentoring to some of the CISOs out there, just to help them also understand the NYDFS, not just to understand the NYDFS requirements and how to implement them, but also how to communicate that to the executive leadership and the board, and how to get this seat in the C-level table and be able to communicate, up and down the program and the cybersecurity risk to the entire organization.
Awesome. All right. Well, before I put Ronell and Brittany on the spot to close us out, I want to first say thank you, Yosi, Chet, and Franklin. Thanks for coming on. I learned a ton myself. I hope the audience got a good amount from it. I think we've got recordings coming out. We're gonna have slides coming out. So we'll get you with some more information there. But thanks again.
Thank you.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Ronell.
Thanks.
All right, and this is just, you'll know where to reach us. This will come out in the material as well. You can hit me up here, and we also have Ronell. So thanks again, and we are gonna go ahead and shut this down. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. It was great.
Bye, everyone.